Hello, I am Cameron Niven, and I believe the most important historical event and historical area of what we learned this year is the Reconstruction era, which is a monumental changes and challenges of the post-Civil War America. The Reconstruction era, which had a major change between 1861 to 1900s after the American Civil War, which gave America that major struggle of many things happening during the era, including the abolishment of slavery, the Democratic Party falling apart, and also the industrialization of America. You may be wondering, Cameron, Cameron, why does this matter? Why does this matter to me? Is because I believe this is the most historical event that we have learned throughout this year that actually has shaped America to what it is today, and also how we've kind of made our world the way it is. I believe that the industrialization and reconstruction is what is making our American society the way it is and always how it has been. Basically, I believe that using this is what makes us using this historical event and explaining what it's like and why is it this way and why did we make it this way. I believe that is the most important. So, in my first source from the National Park Services, which is wide known throughout the US and also with their national parks and also their history events that they always host. So, they have stated that the United States grappled with the question of how to integrate millions of newly freed African Americans into social, political, and labor systems. I believe that using that has always kind of shaped the way America has been and also how it started, how these newly freed African American slaves and how they are supposed to be like how they are going to have to integrate themselves into society, and also how other people will integrate them into social, which is getting into the workforce and also finding homes and also finding jobs and everything else on top of that, the political form and giving them voting rights and also giving them that choice of, oh, you can choose who you want to vote, you can vote in the system without any discrimination, um or that stuff, and also the labor systems, which is again jobs and how they are going to be put into these jobs and also how they should be working these jobs and what jobs they can work. This has changed how people view these African Americans and changed how the challenge. It also pushed a lot of more challenges onto how like what's going to affect them, including the Jim Crow era, which is very controversial, very dangerous for them, especially because it's still widely seen as a really big, deep historical event, and also how the world has been changed and how it's they still have that same discrimination that they did years ago till today, which is very controversial. So, another a big example, like an actual physical example from National Park Services, is the Penn Center, which the Penn Center is a was a school for these formerly enslaved people. As in this picture, you have this is the Penn Center. This is a school for the newly freed African Americans who have been just came out of slavery and how they can learn in society. And you can still visit it today. This is it today, and it is a historical site where you can go and you can go on school trips. You can go on other places that you can go to. Like you can go to this place and you can show you can learn about what it was like to have the first school that these enslaved people can go to. Which another source that I have is from the Library of Congress, which also widely known, is basically they stated about the population distribution from these these newly free African American slaves. Um Basically they stated that the heaviest concentrations in African American slaves, the newly freed ones, was in Maryland, Virginia, and the southeastern states. So I have a map so we can describe this. So basically, this was a map that was the proportion of colored to the aggregate population in the 1890s. This So as you can tell, this map has many colors. You got the very light colors that are not as populated of African Americans, the newly freed slaves, and then you got the lighter orange that has shows like how they're slightly more populated than the less populated, and then you have the really really dark patches that stretches from Texas all the way up to roughly around Maryland and Rhode Island. These spots are where they were highly populated and highly well, like where they were living throughout, like after the slavery. This is where they were living, and this is giving the idea of how like this side of the map is not as full of it, and then you got this side of the map that has all of the population, most of the population. You got a little bit of the map over here that has a little bit of it, but not as much of the population of those freely African American slaves. So, another way to show how the era ended was basically the Compromise of 1877. So that is how that era ended. It wasn't successful at all. It was successful in a way which transformed America because it was successful up to the 1900s because they were figuring out how to integrate these millions of people, and like how like this era has changed throughout the years, and how that compromise of 1877 has changed the societal norms. As my third source is was written by the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, which is the center that runs the basically was also tells a story about how the Underground Railroad was used by these slaves and how they escaped throughout. Which another historical figure Harriet Tubman, who ran away and was freed from slavery because she used that Underground Railroad to get away. And this center kind of gives the story about how these African Americans have lived their lives. It's the African American history basically. And they stated that, however, by 1867, the many southern states began to push back and responded by forming white supremacy groups and organizations, which uh, such as Ku Klux Klan, which is very commonly known, very dangerous, which to enact the racial terror and the intimidation against these African American slaves who just were freed, and also who just got into society just to live their lives, just to be terrorized and harassed all over again. Which, using those forces, basically dragged Reconstruction down to, which basically dragged it and took it to the ground, but also it did change many lives, and also in the belief the Reconstruction has changed millions back in that era and also today. Like using that, changing the world today with how we have still have that sort of racial segregation. Not really. I mean, you had like most recently the George Floyd incident, which changed and also caused a lot of riots and also a lot of like the way that they believe that they don't like the way their society ran, it just did not work. um Another thing that I like to say, the events during the Reconstruction, which I believe there's many events which introduced three constitutional amendments, which one abolished slavery, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, you had the 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship to all people born in the United States, which included these African American slaves, and the 15th Amendment, which prohibited voter discrimination based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude in the U.S. in the 1870s. Another, like a lot of the acts during the Reconstruction Acts, which divided Congress was divided the former Confederacy into five military districts, and which gave those African American men to vote, and also the public schools, which you can still see today. Out if you go into a public school, oh, you have many different like people from many different places, many different like ideas and many different views. Basically, the South had the first state-funded public school systems were basically established back then in that time, and also the economic development, which offered aid to railroads, which again still shapes the United States today, and also the end of the Reconstruction, which was awarded the election to Republic Rutherford B. Hayes, who which ended the Reconstruction altogether.